Okay. Sometimes it doesn't, I miss a step. So anyway, what we're talking about today is shattered dreams and fractured faith conversation, because I think it's something that we need to begin to talk about and investigate how this post-pandemic world, I don't want to call it post-COVID because COVID's going to be with us forever now, but it's a post-pandemic world, is still affecting us greatly. So I know everybody on the call, so I know you all know me, but I am a dyed-in-the-wool baby boomer, being born in 1950, and I am a teacher, a writer, a photographer, a world traveler, and a retired Unity minister. A couple of the details: I am recording the session. The chat has been intentionally turned off so we don't spend our time watching the chat instead of watching what's going on. I ask that you keep your video on if you can. There are some people who may have a bad internet connection or a slow one that can't keep, but what happens when the video is on is you're looking at real people sort of engaging in a way. And it's especially true when we go into our breakout rooms. Mics are muted. If everyone would mute their mic, I would appreciate that, so that whatever background noise, including our parrot, will not be heard by all of you. Later, we will break up into groups for discussion. And like I say, we'll go from 10 a.m. to 11:30, depending on how much conversation we have, how many more people join in as we go through the morning. So today's objective is to raise awareness for the unique issues facing the baby boomers in a post-pandemic world. I hope you realize that we have now moved into what is called an endemic world. And what that means is COVID will always be here, and it's just like the flu. As Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of England, said, just deal with it, which I thought was kind of hard. But what he's really saying is, we're getting to the place where we just need to know that it's part of our lives. And the idea that we're going back to some utopian time in 2019, which of course had its troubles of its own, is not true. But that leaves us lingering with what it is and how we're supposed to be in this world. And I hope that we open a conversation with others for shared support and understanding of why we're being affected in different ways than other generations. So who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about us, the baby boomers. And I think we all know this, but it behooves us to kind of frame it up that we were born between 1946 to 1964. And 76 million babies were born in the United States as compared to 21 million the generation before. And I think it's 67 the generation after. Now, I don't know about you, but being born in 1950, what I remember is our classrooms were always crowded. Every grade had at least 50 kids in it, and at least 4 classrooms to that grade level. There were constantly building schools. A lot of times we were in trailers and things like that because such a massive influx of children during this time period, which although the millennials now have surpassed us in birth rate, there was not the sharp dip that caused, shopping malls to be built, everything to be built and built quickly, housing, schools, all of that. And here were some of the characteristics of our cool, we were the cool generation. Let's be serious. I know these other kids think they're cool, but not as cool as us. We were the migration generation. My father was born on a farm, and maybe many of you had fathers and families that were very landed, very farmer oriented. But by the middle of the 1960s, more and more people were moving into the city. I was born and raised in the city, my brothers and sisters. I mean, going to a farm was like, a day at the zoo kind of thing. It's like, wow, animals and all of that. As a generation, we began to be more health conscious. We changed the laws on smoking. We changed the laws on alcohol, mothers against drunk drivers kind of thing. So we were conscious and becoming more conscious of how our health and the health of others affects us. We were more affluent than our parents' generation. Let's face it, my mom and dad, and probably many of your moms and dads, were children, teenagers, during the Great Depression. So everything was about saving because you never know when you're going to need it. Hoarding, not for the sake of hoarding as sort of an emotional thing, but as hoarding as you just never know when you're going to need string, rubber bands, stuff that we just wouldn't think of keeping now. We also moved from a working economy to a service economy. Now that it was early in our generation, but certainly by the 80s and 90s, we're talking about service-based industries. And whether we like it or not, we're the inventors of the electronic age. We wouldn't be here if we, as the baby boomers, had not been the inventors of this electronic age. We went to the moon. We had all of this great influence on the world. And we also have to remember that we were the challengers of institutions and authority. Remember those days? Make love, not war, the Vietnam War. We were rebelling against the military complex. And so these things, characteristic of our generation, are kind of hanging around in the background of what's going on and some of the issues and feelings we're having today. Why just the baby boomers? COVID and our mental health. So we have some unique challenges. As baby boomers, for the most part, we are more secure than our children or our grandchildren. If we're over 65, we've got Social Security, we've got Medicare. Many people have got their homes paid for, have a little retirement income. It may not be great, but compared to our children and our grandchildren, they look at us and go, what have you got to complain about? You don't have to go out to work. You have some food in the pantry because you have some money coming in. And if you get sick, Medicare is going to take care of maybe not all of it, but at least there's something there. But here's the thing that I realized the other day. We're not talking about, we feel a little bit self-conscious about talking about the fact that we're doing okay. I mean, we don't feel like we're doing okay, but it's hard to complain when it appears that you've got everything from a generation behind us that doesn't have what we have. We were also raised by the silent generation. Your mom and dad, my mom and dad just kind of said, put on your big old panties and just go. Don't complain. Just don't talk about it. When our parents would go out, they went out to play cards. They went out to dance. They went out to be social. But during our time period, we also started to seek out support groups. Even though AA was started in late 1930s, all right, it really was kind of a stigma if you went there. Now, people are accepting support groups as part of their livelihood, part of their mental health kind of system that they have. So what I want you to hear is that we as a generation have kind of stuffed what we're feeling about this COVID business and about how it's affecting us. And the problem is whenever we stuff it, then we can end up having more issues than before. And then the real big issue that does not affect 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60-year-olds. We're getting older. Is that a newsflash to anybody? Hopefully not. And we're aware of it. That's the difference. When I turned 70, I was like, oh my God. And I was watching all these ads about COVID, like for the shot. If you're 65 or over, you're in the danger zone. You're in the zone that needs to get the shots first. And I thought, well, that doesn't apply to me. And then I thought, Marianne, you're way over 65. You're not just 65. You're like way over it. So suddenly we become aware of the question, how much longer do I have to be healthy enough to do what I want to do? And I start asking questions about my independence and my freedom. So in other words, how many of you are still driving at night? Or maybe the question is, how many of you shouldn't be driving at night but still are? I mean, we begin to notice our vision isn't as sharp. We're not as confident driving. I don't hear as I went to the restaurant the other day and with a friend, and all of a sudden I realized I can't hear her well. I can hear her, but I can't discern her voice from the ambient noise around me. And I thought, even me, I've got to start thinking about that. Things hurt that didn't used to hurt. We don't recover as much or as fast. So all of those things begin to weigh on us differently. When we talk about our hopes and dreams, we say, wow, I don't know now if I can do that. Using international travel, which is one of the things many retired people want to do. And I say, well, I want to go to Morocco, which I do. But when will I be able to do that? See, when I'm 40, I could say, well, I'll wait till I'm 50, or I'll even wait till I'm 60. But now at 70, if I say, well, I'll wait 20 years, me in Morocco at 90, probably, but I'm thinking that might not be the reality of the situation. So it's shattered our dreams. And I thought of this analogy the other day. Oh my gosh, all together now. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. And somehow that image, that nursery rhyme struck me so forcefully because that's what's kind of happened to us. Our dreams have been shattered. And I'm not sure we can put them back together again, not because we don't want to, not because we don't have the skill or the money or whatever, but as the clock is ticking, there may not be the time. And we're beginning to feel that in a sense of maybe depression or anxiety about what's happening. So now we're going to break out into groups. And here's what the 3 questions are. What were your dreams for retirement, or what are your dreams for retirement? Some people wanted to be a docent. Some people wanted to be to travel. Some people wanted to give more time to their hobbies, or I'm going to get in shape, or I'm going to do whatever. What were your dreams? When you sat there at your desk and life got tough at your job, you said to yourself, I plan to have time for golf when I retire from this job. That's what I'm going to do. What were your dreams, your retirement dreams? Number 2, did you have a plan A? In other words, I'm going to work until I'm 70. That was my plan A. Now, fortunately for me, I did end up working until I was 70. But that's not true of a lot of people, because what we're seeing now is that 3.2 million people in the US are retiring early. Either they're being forced out of their job as the job goes away, or they're saying, I'm so close to retirement, I I don't want to put up with this anymore. Okay, I'm just leaving. They've had health issues. There's a ramification to maybe they've had COVID, which they continue to have some issues that have not gone away. There's family and friends issues that we're experiencing. Longtime friends are shifting, as we all go through this time, that we each go through it in our own way. And we find that some people that we thought resonated with us 100% don't. And it isn't that we don't like them or we don't love them, but we're just not on the same page with them anymore. And I found that to be very, very difficult, because these are people I love, but it's like, we're just not marching to the beat of the same drummer. And some of our plans, therefore, are no longer realistic. So here's what's going to happen to the breakout rooms if you haven't been in a breakout room before. When I hit the button, it will ask you to join, and so you click it. Introduce yourself. Some of you may know each other that's in the group. It's a random sampling. Make sure everyone has a chance to speak, and I will end the session and you'll automatically come back. So we're going to take about 15 minutes, so you kind of can relax into a conversation. So let's stop sharing. All right. So tell me, what did we think about our hopes and dreams? Have they been shattered? Have you experienced that sense? Yeah. How have they, Abby, you moved to Ecuador, 6 months ago at the most?
1 month ago.
What possessed you to move there?
I'd been here on a research project a few years ago. And then when I couldn't find work, I was desperately broke and I could live on my Social Security down here. So,
wow. Mm-hmm.
Health reasons, fresh air, fresh water.
Oh, really? Are you feeling okay? All that healthy stuff?
It's kind of a shock to my system.
Yeah. Yeah.
No fast food.
No fast food. Wow. So, we're all kind of feeling that in whatever stage we are in this baby boomer generation, in that we had sat at our desks, done our job, put our head down, our ass up, and worked hard because we knew we were going to have this dream. And whatever the dream was, or whatever it looked like I say, maybe it was, a lot of people were wanting to be docents for the SPCA, for the local museums, for, just to go to the opera, to hobbies. My dad was always about, I can't wait to golf every day. Well, he never did golf every day, but it was that dream that kind of kept us going when we sat at the desk and said, I can't take this job one more minute. And so there was this promise, this carrot that was out there that this is the way things were going to be if we just hung on till we got to that magic age and got the gold watch and all of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's like the job went away, the benefits went away, we weren't ready to retire just yet. Our plans for travel, well, you're not going anywhere. And, and all of that stuff begins to impact our psyche. That's what I'm trying to talk about here. It's not just the dream itself. It's the psyche that it begins to wear on us because we're feeling time's running out. How many of you have experienced that sense? You can go ahead and unmute and discuss.
Well, this is Linda talking.
Yeah.
And I think I was shocked that everything was going along so well. And then COVID came along and I sat down on my butt and I'm still sitting here in the same chair for 2 years.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I didn't pray to my sneakers the way you used to say it.
Yeah.
I didn't get up and walk. I didn't take very good care of myself. And then I had to have a knee replacement. So anyway, it's, I just wasn't expecting my health to kind of have some changes, but now I'm back on the track and feeling a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Good. Hey,
I'm in a different boat than everybody, it sounds like. I was born in 38. I'm 83. Mm-hmm. And I had 5 family members die in 2019. And I think, oh, thank God, at least that's over. This has to be better. And then COVID hit. Mm-hmm. That was the first wake up. But as a psychotherapist, as soon as I learned how to do Zoom, or in my case, I use Doxy.me, but my contacts was my clients. And most of them had the same diagnosis of anxiety and depression. So I learned a lot and shared a lot about how to relieve anxiety. And I'm sure all of you have heard, that the past is just a memory and the future is just a fantasy, and all we have is the present. And so I would usually remind people of that and saying, what's your fantasy of after COVID lightens up, after this changes? And I said, my fantasy is more people are going to be working from home and there'll be less traffic. Well, I'm not sure about the traffic because in the Bay Area, it feels like it multiplied. Everybody wants to get out of the house now. It's like, go back home. Yeah. And just recently, in the last 6 months, my family disowned me because I decided in my beginning to retire to stop paying their bill and told them that they're going to have to provide for themselves. And oh my God, that was, that, but God has stepped in, and just before the people started dying, I put it out there that, it would be nice to have a roommate. And then, both Amy Marshall and I, reconnected. And so she's been my roommate, renting a room from me for the last 2 years. And that has been a godsend because I could take off, when somebody died, I could go to the funeral if I chose to, but she was here and she and the dog got along fine. And, I had a dog then, the dog died 2 years. That was one of the deaths in 2019. Mm-hmm. And the dog dying, and when Mark died 20 years ago, it was like the bookends, and then all the other people. But a week before, I went to a workshop in Sedona, Arizona, and there was a book there called, in our room, said, I've chosen to live 120 years. And I've been saying that for years. Being 60 is just halfway there because I'm going to live to be 120. And so most of the time I look and act at least 20 years younger than me. Like Amy and I feel like we're sisters, even though she's 20 years younger than me. And if anyone wants, if we have time, I can show you a technique you can share with people that are anxious, but I'll give somebody else a chance to talk.
Okay. How about you, Cecilia or Sherry, or did you?
Well, I had the pleasure of working throughout the shutdown.
Yeah, you did.
And that wasn't, it was interesting because working in a retail environment, you're facing everybody and all their attitudes about mask, no mask, shots, no shots, whatever. But you're exposed to whatever. And this area, they don't really care. Mm-hmm. It's my way of doing things. I don't care what you tell me. So a lot of that here. And a lot of people got sick. Mm-hmm. I didn't see my family back east for a bit. But Zoom Thanksgivings became a thing. Mm-hmm. And I was jealous in a way of people who were home. I'm just doing my crafts. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, gee, I wonder what that feels like.
Boring.
Is it?
After a while. Yeah.
I just feel like now that I've made, I told the group, but most of you don't know, in the past month, I actually changed my status to part-time, and I'm independent contractor doing only one of the million things, one of the hats that I was wearing before. And so for the moment, that is giving me the opportunity to rest and to reconnect with all the things I like to do, which I have fantasized about doing, mm-hmm. and picking one at a time. And whether it is, vacuuming under the sofa or, yes, the little things. It's like, is that where the cat toys are? So yeah, there's things.
Yeah. So we've all had to change, and I think, Linda, you brought up an interesting point. It surprised us, or at least it did me, and from the sounds of what you're saying, is that when I sat down, I fell down. I sat down. And even though I've always been an exercise person, get out and walk, I'm like, really? Oh my God. It's so far to bend down those 10 inches to pick up my shoes, and get out and go. And, and I really thank Diane, because Diane was working the entire time, kind of like what Sherry said. And I noticed that people who were working and having to make the decision every day to get up and get out and to face how they were going to be with the COVID that would be all around them, they seem to be much more proactive. Joan, you were also working during this time. They were much more proactive about taking care of themselves, but they didn't have as much fear about it. It's like, before I walk out the door, I'm going to have to say, just do it and get over it. Whereas those of us who stayed home, and I find this a lot with people who were retired and stayed literally physically at home, they struggle to get out the door now. They really, really struggle. And they don't think so, but they only want to do a Zoom call, and they don't want to get together, and they, I don't know about going there, and I don't know. So there's a different barometer, if you will, of fear that people are having. And that's what I said earlier. There's some people who I love dearly, but they are still very steeped in that fear, and I'm not. So I want to go someplace, but they are like, I don't know. There might be a lot of people. Do you know how that's happening? And therefore, my common base with them is shifting. We still have many things in common, but it's moving farther away from each other, which surprised me, because I thought, well, you're my friend and you have the same perspective as I do, but then how it plays out is becoming very different in people's lives. So I'm going to move on to the next set about what about fractured faith, because I'm not talking about faith as in faith community. I'm talking about how our problems are set in a larger context. And this is where the baby boomer generation really begins to kind of show itself to us. So our foundations have been fractured. That's across the board. Yet, as the baby boomers, we were fracturing them early on. Now, those of you who may remember, you can date yourself, Wild in the Streets, born to be wild, okay? If you're 30, you're through. The mantra of the movie was 14 or fight. Movie starred Hal Holbrook. And what was the mantra? The great mantra was, don't trust anybody over 30. Okay, well, there's a problem. Who's over 30 now? Don't trust anyone over 30. It's kind of an icky movie, but it became a cult classic in the late 60s, early 70s. Don't trust anybody over 30. And I thought, yeah, because I'm only 25 at that point. I'm not trusting anybody over 30. What does that embed in our collective consciousness? Okay. We were the challengers of the old regime, and we exposed it. Tricky Dicky Nixon, remember him? The political military complex. What was the Vietnam protests all about? Make love, not war. Hell no, we won't go. Okay. We also exposed religious and sexual abuse issues as part of our generational energy. Okay. It wasn't any one of us, but it was all of us. Women's reproductive rights and the use of the pill. Now I have a choice as to how many children or if I have any children, where before I didn't have that choice. And the woman's place is not in the home. See, that was not my mother's mantra. None of this was my mother's mantra. My mother said the Catholic Church is right, regardless. My parents, they got married and birth control. What was that? We had 5 kids and that kind of thing. Belonged to a big Catholic family. But suddenly, as the years went on, I remember, and most of you on this call know Pat Coker. She's a little bit older than I am. And she made a comment. She said, one day I was a happy housewife. And the next day it wasn't good to be a housewife. So I got kind of degraded and demoted, and I didn't even know it because I wasn't out there in the working place, and I loved being a mom. And that was my mom. I loved being a mom. And I'm like, you do? Why? You had a child like me. You would have stopped at the first one, you would have thought, but apparently not. So it's a dramatic shift. It is still called the me generation. And what happens during our era is that we begin to see both parents working, which before they used to work together, but on the farm. They didn't work separately in different industries and different factories from one another. They worked together. This prosperity gospel was preached to the nation, and the prosperity gospel is basically this: be a good Christian and God will reward you with prosperity. Well, okay. And in a way, that gospel of prosperity took off because as a nation, we were highly affluent. Post-World War II America, when it entered into the 1950s, was the most affluent nation in the world. But it came with a great deal of stress. And we would say things like, we're keeping up with the Joneses. Remember that? That was a common phrase when I was a child. Whether or not you were keeping up with the Joneses, but it was a phrase that meant something to us. It's like, well, my mom's working, my dad's working, so we can keep up with the Joneses because the Joneses have, whoever the Joneses were, they had it and we didn't. And then, of course, television. We're the generation of television who saw Ward and June Cleaver. And of course, we all know Ozzie and Harriet. Harriet with her beautiful pearls, dancing through the kitchen with her brand new Hot Point appliances.
And high heels.
And high heels, of course. So we see these models that before our moms and dads did not have that model. Okay. So when I talk about building blocks or foundational blocks, I'm not talking about blocks to our progress. I'm talking about the foundation we were built upon. We were built upon a circle of belonging that was family and home. Good Catholic family, lots of kids in the neighborhood, everybody played together, all of that. Church and community. Parents were involved in community organizations, church organizations. That's just what you did. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all of that. And our country was terra firma. Nothing invaded our country. Nothing touched our country. Everything was great in our country. And there's a tremendous sense of this when you talk about people, ask people to leave our country in the sense of travel. It's like, when do we get home? Well, home is where you are. I mean, it's what you are. It's that, but this sense of, where do I belong? I have to go back to the United States to be in my country and therefore safe. But the baby boomer generation said, "Yep, I want to travel." And I know some of you on this call, in your early 20s, took a backpack and said, "I'm off to Europe for 6 months." You traveled internet. My father was forced to travel by the United States Army, but nobody else in my family traveled. Aunts, uncles, cousins, relatives, they did not travel internationally. But now my generation said, "I want to go. I want to see. I want to be out. I want to experience." We had friends that were not like us. That was a big thing in college, to get friends that were not like us. I had a couple Protestant friends. They were Lutheran. Oh my God. My parents thought this was just crazy. But when you think about it, it was never their mindset. It was my mindset. I want to expand my circle. And intermarriage. What was the most popular movie? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, right? It was a big movie, and there was a lot of talk about it. There was a lot of conflict about that movie, because it was like, oh, no. No, we don't do that. But we began to do it. Now, what I want all of you to understand is that I'm not blaming. It's about understanding why we as a generation are more affected and how we are affected than other generations. Okay? So we had a generational implode, and of course it was brought on by COVID. Our foundation was already fractured. And listen to this. We don't trust political, military, medical, church authority. Well, news flash. This is not new. This is something we've started years ago. And now when Dr. Fauci gets on the news and says, this is the way it is, we go, I don't think so. But when we had to line up to get a smallpox sugar cube, I bet you no parent was asked. We just lined up. I remember lining up in the cafeteria. We got the little sugar cubes. That was good. Ooh. For the polio vaccine, nobody asked anybody. We just did it because they believed in the authority of the medical community, of the government, of the military, that they would protect us at all costs. Okay? They were the authority. But now we challenge the authority into the 60s, into the 70s, and the ramifications of challenging that authority on all levels. Then I'm not saying it wasn't just, a lot of times it was, but now we don't know what authority to trust. Where is Walter Cronkite, right? When Walter said the news, it was done. That was the news, okay? Because we moved from the farm, we're disconnected from nature. And because we are in the gospel of prosperity, we don't know how to relax because we have to work harder and more to keep up with the Joneses. And because we're the me generation, we're disconnected by choice. Okay? Even before COVID happened, we're disconnected by choice. And therefore, we lack skills for building connections in this new world. You see how all this is beginning to shape inside of us. And like I'm saying, this is psychic stuff that's beginning to, we're feeling it, only we haven't been able to kind of put words on it or around it. The COVID mantra was stay home, stay safe. We all know that. The problem is, it is the antithesis of everything the baby boomers believed, right? We wanted to get out. We wanted to travel. We wanted to have new friends. We wanted to open up the world in our own sphere as well as a larger sphere. So part of what the anxiety that we're feeling is because we're not risking, exploring, discovering, growing. Because that was our mantra. Get out, get her done. Have fun, go for it. Stay home and stay safe was never our mantra. And so what's happening is we understand that we need to do that, okay, in 2020, because we didn't have a handle on what this COVID thing was all about. But now we've got vaccines and now we've got all this stuff. And yet we still feel this tension because the mantra that we have always lived by is in direct opposition to the mantra we're being told or have been told. What the rub is now our greatest enemy is not COVID, it is fear. And those of you who are in my group, this was way back at Unity of Fremont, in the early 90s. Remember we read the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway? Susan Jeffers, it's still an awesome book. And she was saying, fear will always be with us. COVID in one form or another is here to stay. Let's just get over it. There's no point in even talking about it. The COVID is not one virus. It's a family. It's got cousins. It's got relatives. MRSA, SARS, all of the respiratory illnesses are part of the COVID family. What the challenge is now is fear that needs to be mitigated, for fear is a cunning and dangerous foe, a subtle and corrosive taskmaster. It makes you think that if you stay home, you'll be safe. Really? Or is that your fear speaking? And as we've all experienced, it's easier to sit on the couch than to get up and go. It takes energy and commitment to get up and go consistently. That's the key word. I can go to lunch. Okay, Linda calls me up and says, Marianne, let's go to lunch. And I, oh, yes, I put it on my calendar. The day that I'm supposed to go to lunch with Linda, I think to myself, why did I make that commitment? I like Linda, but I don't want to get dressed. I don't want to go out. I don't want to have to get a mask. I don't, yada, yada, yada. So we have to consistently sort of force ourselves to get up and go, because isolation, I love this quote, isolation is a devil's garden. What your mother used to say, idle hands are the devil's playwork. Yeah, idle hands. Now, remember, due diligence and responsible behavior are required because the situation is fluid. But we have given our power, this is the key point. We have given our power over to fear and anxiety. And we need to get our power back, to claim our power back. And I love this little picture of Humpty Dumpty, obviously a child's drawing, because what it says is Humpty got put back together again, sort of. And here's some of the Band-Aids that Humpty has. Things are reopening, but I stay at home. I've aged in these 2 years more than I realized. All I do is talk about COVID. Things that I used to enjoy are just okay now. I live with constant disappointment, plans being changed because of COVID. So I don't plan anything. I just don't feel like I used to. I feel adrift from former friends, even some family members. And I don't feel engaged in life, my own life. It's just kind of going by me in a blaze of Netflix. So we're going to break up into groups again. You may or may not end up in the same group. And here's our questions. How does understanding our generation shed some light on our current struggles, that we don't trust authority, me generation, we're getting older, and issues of our freedom because of our health? How do you experience this fear? Do you, for me, I can relate to all of those quotes. lethargy, depression, no motivation, disappointment. I just don't feel like myself. And are you taking steps to proactively reclaim your life and your dreams? So let's stop. Hello. Those of you who know Cheryl Ryder, she was having some back issues and said, tell you, she loved all of you and it was good to see you. It's kind of fun to see old friends across all this expanse of time. Not that we're talking about time going by quickly, but there you have it. So what are your thoughts about, reflecting upon our generation and how some of the things that we were so strong and adamant about when we were younger are now kind of working against us? How about you, Patrick Harris? Oh, I see you've got a pet there.
Either frozen or stuck.
No.
There he is.
Oh.
He was napping?
Yes, he's napping. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Yes. What do you want for lunch, dear? Yeah. See, now he's perks up. Yeah. Well, has it helped you to really reflect upon what made our generation strong, different, and that now some of that stuff is working against us, like challenging authority or that we're seeing the passage of time, which we never thought was going to happen to us. It was going to happen to other people, but not to us.
I took a trip last week. I took my granddaughters who are 12 and their mom on a road trip. Mm-hmm. We went down to the Grand Canyon, and the entire time the girls had their little earbuds in and was playing on their cell phones. We didn't grow up with that. We looked out the window. We saw, oh, look at this, or look at that, or what kind of a tree is that, or look at the clouds making shapes, or what is on that back of that semi truck, or oh my gosh, what is that? And it didn't happen. And I felt really bad. It's like all this electronics has blossomed to where you plug a USB cable into your belly button and it takes off from there. It's a whole world. It's like when Epcot Center opened or in Disneyland, and they first came up with the telephone that had a video on it. And it was like, oh my God, how can that possibly be? But here we are today. Mm. And it's like, we can't complain about it because we've done it to ourselves. And to unplug is very traumatic for this next generation because their school is on there, their friends are on there. And it's like, isn't there anything else you would rather do? Go learn to play the piano, play the guitar, go play basketball. Oh no, I'm playing gizmo things with their friends. And it's like, what have we done to this next couple of generations behind us? And it's scary. It's not the world I wanted to leave behind. Mm-hmm.
It sort of got rolling and then.
Yeah, it's gone way out of control. Way out of control.
And yet, just like we're saying, if we were in a pandemic world without this electronic connection,
yeah,
how much more would we feel the isolation and the desolation of being separate from one another?
It was so bad because I didn't have this. I have high-speed internet. It's like, I can do this.
I know.
I look out my windows and all I see is trees. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I had to walk down my driveway a quarter of a mile and stand and wait for a car to pass so that I could see there were still people on the earth. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I felt. And it was like, there's other people out there. There really are. And it's like, it's time to get in the car and just go.
Yeah, do something. Exactly. Caroline, how about you?
What about me?
Yeah. Oh, you're as asleep as Patrick.
No.
The idea of our generation sort of planted some seeds that now we're having to struggle with on a whole different level than either people who are older than us. If you were born before 1945 or after, you didn't have this kind of chafing, stay home, stay safe, and go out and explore the world. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about pre-boomer and post-boomer, you know, I think that the rate of change certainly prior to World War II was much slower. And it's, you know, World War II obviously accelerated technologically in a whole bunch of different ways. And so the difference between my grandparents' generation and then my kids and younger generation, Gen X's and Z's and that kind of thing, is like universe difference in that kind of thing. And I agree with what Donna was saying, is that I have friends that are 10 to 15-ish years younger than me, and their kids live on electronic devices. And I've heard interesting, kind of scary interviews and studies with experts to talk about the addictive qualities of this stuff. I mean, and yes, Zoom is wonderful to stay connected, and it was wonderful to do that, but that our younger than our generation, these kids are going to be struggling. I mean, they struggle with the human connection and that kind of thing. And so I wasn't a protester when I was younger. I wasn't one of those kinds of people. But I think that Watergate was kind of what blew open the whole trust in government thing. I mean, then that was like a really explicit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not rejection, not rebuttal. What's the word? Betrayal. Sorry. That was a real big betrayal. And so since then, I've kind of grown up with, so for me personally, while I trust Dr. Fauci and science regarding all of this COVID thing, I am highly distrustful of government. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. I mean, some are worse than others and all of that kind of stuff, and some statements are worse than others. So what I personally find myself struggling with is hearing all of this terrible stuff that's going on over the last COVID and before, and knowing that I can't do anything about it. I personally can't do anything about Ukraine. I can't do anything about Putin. I can't do anything about the dysfunction in our federal government. I can't do anything about dysfunction in my state government in Lansing, Michigan. But I saw a really interesting article, and it was talking about pay attention to your local contests, your county commissioners, your school boards, your township supervisors, that kind of thing. And in the last year and a half, I've been spending a lot more time on that, and it helps me to feel engaged and effective. And I thought, at least I can have some impact there. So while I am deeply distrustful of, and what also amazes me is that at our township level, we're having some of the same issues that they are at the federal level on our township board. It's like, oh my God, it's like a microcosm, but it filters all the way down or all the way up, whatever you like to do about it. So I really don't have anything else to add to that, but yeah, so that.
How about you, Diane?
Repeat the question.
Well,
go ahead.
That's okay. It's the sense that, is it helpful? Maybe I'll phrase it this way. Is it helpful to remember some of the things that were endemic or were just a part of who we were as a generation that is causing some of our internal distress right now? That we were always ready to go and ready to do, and now we're not. And so inside of ourselves, I see, and you and I've had this discussion before too, it's like people feel really stuck. They sat down when COVID started and they haven't been up again in a mental way, in an emotional way. They feel disconnected. They feel adrift. it's like, well, where is the anchor points? And yet realizing that some of those very anchor points, we as a generation purposefully and intentionally broke apart.
You know, I think you spoke to our generation, our parents. I lived with my so I was raised by, I skipped a generation, so to speak, in being raised by my grandparents. And so I did grow up on a farm and big gardens and cows and, you know, all of that. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I think, if anything, what COVID has taught us, or at least what I hear people talking about, is that we need to stop, slow down. And I don't mean slow down, sit your butt in a chair and don't get up, or don't go out and put yourself out into the world, but to think about the simpler times of, I mean, do we know how to grow a tomato? Mm-hmm. Do we know how to raise vegetables? Do we know how to do those things? Do we know what it's like to walk barefoot on the ground? I mean, back in those simpler times when things were more simple, we can choose to do that again. I mean, that's just kind of where my mind goes. I just don't want to buy into the fear anymore. And then, so how am I going to choose to think and live differently? Is kind of where I'm at.
And reclaiming our power over fear. Because like the book title, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, we're never going to get rid of fear. It just comes along with us. So I want to share a few kind of closing thoughts here because I want to honor our time. I think that we were listening to an Oprah broadcast with Brene Brown, and she was talking about going within and to reclaiming our power, our strength, our foundation, our anchors. Yet I don't disagree with that, but I feel that's still too global. I think if you're really struggling, I think these are some things that you can do every day, simple things, and they're not hard to remember. Number one is find a miracle in your body. Now, I want to be much more specific than even that. I want you, when you put both feet on the ground every single morning when you get out of bed, to say, my body is a miracle. You did not get up by any power of your own, so to speak. You got up by muscles, bones, nerves, connections, this entire body, the wholeness of our body. See, what we've been doing in our bodies is our bodies are what get the COVID. Our bodies are what are susceptible to the COVID. And so we've negated our body. So my intention here is that we need to start thinking again as our body as the incredible miracle that it is. And when we start seeing it in just those little moments, every moment you wake up, put your feet on the floor and go, my body is a miracle. We begin to reframe in our brain what we've been subtracting from our brain about how our body is weak and it's not defending us against COVID and all of this stuff. Now we need to intentionally reframe by finding the miracle that is in our body. Secondly, I want to invite you to call up a friend. Yes, I'm available. And not talk about COVID. Oh, I know. This is a tough one, folks. I've been out to lunch with several people lately, and the first thing we say is, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And now, today, the implication is, how are you doing and feeling and dealing with COVID? Whereas in 2018, 2019, when I would say, how are you doing? You'd say, well, things are happening at work. This is going, that's going, I'm going here, there. I had all my dreams that were cooking. We have a brain. We need to start reutilizing our brain to talk about something different. And you're not allowed to talk about the Ukraine either. Okay. You've got to get away from what the external world is talking about and talk about yourself, your hopes, your dreams, because as you refire those brain cells, you begin to once again say, I had hopes, I had dreams, I had plans, and I can maybe have to morph them a little bit now, but I still have hopes and dreams and plans. And the last thing is to read a poem every day. I've been reading more and more poetry lately because I think there's pictures within the words that allow us to dream again. Mary Oliver, of course, is one of my classic go-tos, but, Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass, and Henry Thoreau, and all the older ones to help us in small little ways. It's like when somebody says you need to exercise. That is not a helpful comment. You need to say to them, just do 250 steps an hour. 250 steps, get a Fitbit, 250 steps an hour. That's not hard to do. I can walk around my house, that's 250 steps. So we have to take this big thing and begin to, if we're going to ever conquer this fear, we have to start making small intentional moments for the purpose of reclaiming our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. Okay. I want to thank everybody for being here. It's been fun. You all know my email, but I'd restate it. I will send out a PDF file with the slides this afternoon if you want to walk back through them again. And also, if you're saying, gee, I would like to explore a little more, I would invite you to a workshop. It's actually a 4-part class starting in March, on March 8th. It's on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central with my brother by another mother, Chaz Wesley. And those of you who are here in Tulsa know Chaz. Chaz has been a hospice chaplain. He's a well-known speaker in this area about the whole topic of change, loss, and grief. And we're not just talking about the grief or the loss of a person in our life, but the grief and the loss of our dreams, the grief and the loss of the changes that we've been through, a way of life, and that kind of thing. So if you're at all interested, up here you see it, it's chazwesley.com. And I invite you to be part of it because I know that I certainly am. I know what great work Chaz does. And then I hit the wrong button. Okay. You're here somewhere. I will find you again. There we are. So it is past the 11:30 hour and I want to honor our timing. I just want to say thank you to all of you for your participation, thoughts, feelings. Please, email me because I feel on my heart, genuinely, this is some sort of topic that's calling to me. And I'm struggling to find my footing in it. And that's okay because it's morphing. So any thoughts, any comments you would like to make, I would truly appreciate it. And with that, I wish you a wonderful weekend. We are getting a little bit of sunshine. It might get above freezing today. There is hope that we can get out again. And love all of you. And thank you for being with me today. Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Marianne.
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Love you.
Bye-bye.